The Galactic Empire had ruled over the stars for thousands of years, its vast fleets and technologically superior armies dominating countless civilizations. Across the galaxy, alien species trembled at the mere mention of the Empire, whose leadership was both wise and ruthless, keeping the peace through power. Their advanced technology had made them nearly invincible, and no species had dared challenge their reign, until Earth came into the picture. Initially, the Empire had not even noticed the existence of this small, uncharted planet in a far corner of the galaxy. That is, until a scout ship, sent on a routine mission to map distant systems, made a fateful discovery. Earth, a seemingly insignificant world, was home to an unknown species, humans. At first, the Empire dismissed them. The humans appeared primitive, with outdated technology and fractured societies. Their world seemed to be in a constant state of conflict and disarray, far from the advanced civilizations the Empire was used to dealing with. However, the scout ship's report sent a ripple through the Empire's high command. Something about Earth's inhabitants felt different. Though their technology was crude, there was a raw energy to the humans, a strange and unpredictable nature that couldn't be ignored. The first contact came when the Empire attempted to establish a border post near Earth's territory. It was meant to be a simple task, a routine expansion. But what the Empire didn't anticipate was a sudden, unprovoked resistance from the humans. A skirmish broke out, one that quickly spiraled out of control. The humans, though vastly outmatched in terms of firepower and numbers, fought back with an intensity that left the Empire's soldiers bewildered. They didn't follow the conventional rules of warfare. There were no strategies that could predict their next move. It wasn't just the human weapons that caught the Empire off guard, it was the human spirit. They fought with a ferocity that couldn't be accounted for. Even in the face of overwhelming force, the humans didn't back down. They didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, they fought fiercely, using their environment, their limited resources, and their sheer willpower to make the Empire rethink its approach. The battle, though small in scope, ended with the Empire's forces retreating, unable to maintain control. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had pushed back the might of the Empire's advanced forces. Word of this unexpected outcome quickly spread throughout the Empire. What was once dismissed as a minor conflict became a critical turning point. The message was clear. Humans are not to be underestimated. The higher-ups in the Empire could not ignore what had happened. A race considered primitive had not only held their own, but had made the Empire's superior technology seem vulnerable. The reports of the skirmish created a buzz across the galaxy. Was this the first sign of something much larger? Was humanity truly as weak as they seemed? The Empire could no longer afford to underestimate them. As news of the humans' tenacity spread throughout the Empire, a strange sense of unease settled over its leaders. How could a species with such limited resources and technology inflict such damage on one of the most powerful galactic empires in existence? It was an uncomfortable question, one that left more answers unanswered. The scout ships were recalled, and more attention was placed on the developing situation on Earth. The Empire had ruled for so long with impunity that the very idea of a threat from such an unexpected place seemed impossible. But after that first skirmish, no one could ignore the possibility that humanity might be capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. And so, the Empire took its first cautious steps toward understanding humanity, its curiosity now tinged with fear. The message to the galaxy had shifted: beware of humans. They were no longer just another species to conquer or control. They were something new, something unpredictable, something dangerous. The Galactic Empire, after months of skirmishes and failed attempts to break the resistance, finally made the decision that would change the course of the war. Earth, a planet that had once been seen as an easy target, now found itself the center of a full-scale invasion. The Empire, accustomed to overwhelming any foe in its path with its technological might, had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight back. The first wave of invasion fleets arrived with thunderous force, their ships unleashing torrents of destruction on Earth's cities. Yet, the humans did not crumble in fear. They didn't scatter or surrender like the Empire had expected. Instead, a group of elite soldiers, each from different nations, cultures, and backgrounds, was thrown together, their mission to protect their home world. They were an unlikely team, bound by a single cause: survival. What the Empire had failed to understand was the power of diversity, the strength drawn from the very differences that separated the humans. The soldiers, representing different parts of Earth, quickly learned to blend their unique experiences into an unorthodox but effective war machine. From the jungles of Southeast Asia to the deserts of Africa, from the icy tundras of Russia to the urban sprawl of North America, each soldier brought something that no Empire commander could predict: ingenuity, flexibility, and an unyielding will to fight. These humans did not follow standard military protocols. They fought like they had something to prove, like their survival depended on it. And in many ways it did. The Empire's generals, initially confident in their victory, began to see something they hadn't expected. These humans were not only fighting to survive, they were fighting with everything they had. Every day, the Empire's superior technology was met with something unexpected. The humans used their knowledge of the terrain and their adaptability to outmaneuver and ambush the Empire's forces in ways that confused the invaders. What should have been simple battles turned into costly losses for the Empire. The advanced alien weaponry, once thought invincible, was neutralized by human ingenuity. Trap-laden forests, abandoned cities turned into fortresses, and improvised weapons that even the Empire's artificial intelligence couldn't predict. With each small victory, the human soldiers grew more confident, more determined. The Empire's armies, once unshakable in their belief of superiority, were starting to question everything. How could a species with no experience in intergalactic warfare, with nothing but their willpower and resourcefulness, keep defeating them? It didn't make sense. The Empire's finest strategists couldn't figure out the humans. They sent more soldiers, more advanced weaponry, but the humans always adapted faster. Even as the alien forces launched their most powerful weapons, the humans found ways to strike back, using the very technology the Empire thought they couldn't understand. The soldiers, once mere individuals fighting for their lives, now became a symbol of humanity's strength. They fought not just for themselves, but for their families, their homes, and their future. The Empire's generals were perplexed. They had expected a quick victory, a simple conquest. Instead, they were faced with something they hadn't prepared for: the human spirit. It was raw, it was unpredictable, and it was unstoppable. No matter how many times they pushed forward with overwhelming force, humanities will seem to grow stronger, fiercer, more united. This war, which had been designed to break Earth's resistance, was slowly becoming a war the Empire might lose. The soldiers on the ground weren't just defending their planet, they were redefining the very nature of warfare. The Empire had thought they could crush Earth's resistance with ease. They were wrong. The more the war dragged on, the more the Empire's generals began to realize that this war was never meant to be won by the humans. And yet, with every battle they fought, with every victory they claimed, the humans proved that they were more than capable of changing the fate of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire's leadership had never faced an enemy like humanity. Despite their superior technology, their advanced weapons, and their vast fleets, the Empire had been repeatedly stung by the relentless and unpredictable tactics of the humans. Every time they thought they were about to crush Earth's resistance, something unexpected happened. Humanity's unyielding spirit and resourcefulness turned what should have been easy victories into costly defeats. The Empire's generals, once confident in their unchallenged power, now found themselves staring at the growing resistance and wondering how they had miscalculated so badly. It was clear that something drastic needed to be done, something that would put an end to humanity's rise before it spiraled into something far worse. After intense deliberation, the Empire's highest commanders decided to send their most ruthless and experienced warrior to Earth, Warlord Vorthrax. Vorthrax had led countless campaigns across the galaxy, defeating enemies that had once seemed untouchable. He was known for his brutal efficiency and his cold, calculating nature. The Empire's leadership trusted him to put down the human rebellion quickly. But they underestimated one crucial thing: Earth's ability to adapt. The moment Volthrax arrived, he dismissed Earth's defenses as primitive and chaotic. He expected a quick, brutal battle where his fleet would easily wipe out the human forces and put an end to the threat. He brought with him the Empire's most advanced war machines, expecting to dominate the landscape with overwhelming firepower. What he didn't realize was how much the humans had learned in such a short time. Earth's soldiers were now experts in urban warfare, a field that no other species had mastered the way humans had. They knew their cities like the back of their hands, every alleyway, every building, every rooftop a potential trap. The environment itself became their weapon. The humans didn't fight in the open fields the Empire was used to. They fought in the streets, in the shadows, using guerrilla tactics that even Volthrax couldn't predict. His fleet, though enormous and powerful, quickly found itself caught in a deadly web of traps and ambushes. As the Empire's massive war machines charged into human territory, they found themselves immobilized by cleverly placed explosives, hacked communication networks, and ambushes that turned their high-tech vehicles into easy targets. Volthrax's confidence began to crack as his forces were destroyed one by one, their massive fleets reduced to nothing more than debris. The humans were everywhere, turning every corner into a battlefield, using their knowledge of the land and their ability to improvise to outsmart even the most advanced technology. Volthrax, accustomed to crushing his enemies with ease, now found himself in a war of attrition, something that had never happened before. He was unable to keep up with the humans' relentless and unpredictable methods. For every loss he suffered, the humans seemed to strike harder, forcing him into a corner. The warlord's arrogance was replaced with growing unease. He ordered his forces to retreat, but it was already too late. The damage had been done. The Empire's prized war machines, once seen as invincible, lay in ruins, and Earth's resistance had shown no signs of stopping. As the Empire reeled from the losses, something even more unsettling began to happen. News of humanity's victories spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Whispers began to circulate through the Empire's channels, a warning that could not be ignored. Run, humanity is coming. It wasn't just a single threat anymore. It was a warning for the entire galaxy. The human resistance was not just an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, something that could shift the balance of power across the stars. The Empire's leaders, once so confident in their invincibility, now feared that humanity's will could not be stopped. The question was no longer whether they could defeat Earth. It was whether they could survive the storm that humanity was about to unleash. The first battle was over, but the war had only just begun, and the Empire knew it had underestimated its most dangerous opponent yet. As the dust settled from the first few battles, the Galactic Empire found itself facing a new kind of threat, one that it had never expected. What had started as a series of small skirmishes between Earth's military and the Empire's vast war machine had now transformed into something much larger. Humanity's resistance had quickly grown stronger, evolving from scattered groups of fighters into a formidable force. Across Earth, civilians and military personnel alike had joined forces, pooling their knowledge, resources, and ideas. What had once been seen as a disorganized, desperate fight for survival had turned into a well-coordinated rebellion, one that the Empire could no longer dismiss as a mere nuisance. The resistance grew rapidly, expanding to every corner of Earth, and it soon became clear that this war was no longer just about defending their homeworld. The humans had united, and their cause was spreading beyond Earth's borders. Earth's technological advances, driven by the ingenuity of its people, began to outpace the Empire's expectations. Civilian innovators, once limited by their planet's fractured society, had suddenly become the key players in this rebellion. Engineers, scientists, and even former diplomats were now designing advanced weapons, modifying alien technology, and creating machines of war. The humans, who had once been considered nothing more than primitive creatures, had tapped into their boundless creativity and resourcefulness. As the human resistance grew stronger, so did their alliances. Species from across the galaxy, oppressed by the Empire's tyranny, began to rally to the human cause. These species, once too pitiful to stand up to the Empire, saw in humanity's fight the spark of something they had longed for: freedom. What started as a desperate struggle for survival on Earth had now become a full-blown revolution. The Empire, blindsided by the speed and strength of the human resistance, had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humanity was no longer a minor inconvenience. They were a force to be reckoned with. This realization sent shockwaves through the Empire. The once unquestioned rule of the Galactic Empire was now under threat by a species it had written off as weak and fractured. It was the humans' unity, born out of their shared struggle, that terrified the Empire the most. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was unsure of its victory. The Resistance's growing power was only the beginning. News of human victories, once considered impossible, spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Communications between the Empire's far-flung colonies began to break down as uncertainty spread. Planets that had long been loyal to the Empire started to waver. The fear of rebellion began to take root, and the once impenetrable might of the Empire was now questioned. Leaders of oppressed planets, seeing humanity's success, began to consider their options. No longer willing to remain silent under the Empire's boot, they began to open secret lines of communication with Earth's resistance, offering support and resources. The Empire was losing its grip. The very foundation of its rule, fear and control, was starting to crumble. With each victory, the humans gained more ground, and their resistance became more than just a local problem. It became a galactic threat. The Empire's military, stretched thin from constant conflict, could not keep up with the escalating rebellions across the galaxy. What was once considered the safest part of the Empire, the core systems, now found itself at risk. Even the most remote planets, once thought untouched by the Empire's cruelty, began to fear for their future. The message was clear: if humanity could rise up and shake the Empire to its core, no system was safe. The winds of change were blowing across the galaxy, and they were carrying the human spirit with them. As the Empire scrambled to adapt, its once imposing power began to wane. Humanity had become the symbol of hope for the oppressed, a beacon for those who had long suffered under the Empire's rule. As their revolution spread, the galaxy itself began to tremble. The Empire had underestimated humanity. And now, the humans were ready to show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. The storm had only just begun, and the Empire was no longer sure it could weather it. The Galactic Empire, once an unstoppable force that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, now found itself on the verge of collapse. Desperation seeped into the Empire's leaders as they watched their power crumble under the weight of humanity's resistance. What had started as a small, almost laughable insurrection had grown into an all-consuming storm, and Earth's forces, fueled by an unyielding spirit, were pushing the Empire to the brink. In one final attempt to suppress the humans, the Empire threw everything they had left at Earth. Their fleets were massive, their armies vast, and their war machines more advanced than anything the humans had ever encountered. Yet, even as the Empire unleashed its full might, the humans stood firm, refusing to back down. The battles that followed were the most brutal the galaxy had ever seen. Cities burned, entire regions were leveled, and the skies darkened with the remnants of destroyed fleets. But despite the overwhelming force, humanity adapted, fought back, and found ways to turn the tide. Vorthrax, the once proud warlord, now stood as a hollow shell of the warrior he had once been. His confidence had been shattered. In the early days of the war, he had believed that his victory was inevitable. He had thought that humanity's spirit was fragile, that their resistance would falter under the Empire's crushing power. But he had underestimated the strength of Earth's people. He had seen their cities burn, their forces cut down, yet still they rose up. He had watched them turn the tables on his fleet time and time again, using their ingenuity, their environment, and their relentless determination to strike at the heart of the Empire's forces. It had broken him. What had once seemed like a simple victory now felt like an endless nightmare. As the Empire's forces dwindled and their greatest minds scrambled to understand how the humans had come so far, a terrifying realization began to spread throughout the highest ranks of the Empire. It wasn't their technology that made humanity so dangerous. It wasn't the size of their armies or the strength of their weapons. No, the true power of humanity lay in their unity, the strength of their will. It was the ability to come together, to fight for a cause greater than themselves, that had allowed them to achieve what no other species could. The Empire had relied on division, on keeping planets and species under their thumb through fear and control. But the humans had something the Empire could never understand: the power of a united people who had been pushed too far and refused to be broken. The final blow to the Empire's morale came when their leaders, in a last-ditch effort to maintain control, issued a command that would seal their fate: run. Their greatest generals and commanders had no answers. The strategy that had once been flawless now seemed to be leading them straight into defeat. As the Empire's forces scattered, retreating from Earth and other planets, a broadcast came from Earth that echoed across the galaxy. A message of defiance, a warning to all those who had supported the Empire. The message was simple, but its impact was immense. "We are coming for you, Empire. All of you." It wasn't just a promise, it was a declaration. The humans had awakened, and they were no longer content with merely defending their world. They were coming for the heart of the Empire, and they would stop at nothing until every corner of the galaxy was free of the Empire's iron grip. The fear among the Empire's leaders deepened. How could it be that a species so weak, so insignificant, had become a force capable of shaking the very foundation of their power? How had the humans, once seen as nothing more than primitive creatures, brought the Empire to its knees? And now, with their final message broadcast to the stars, the Empire knew that humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. The tables had turned. The Empire had underestimated humanity from the beginning, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. The storm that had started on Earth was no longer contained. It was a galactic revolution, and the Empire had no idea how to stop it. The war had reached its final devastating stages. The once invincible Galactic Empire, with its vast fleets and countless worlds under its control, had been brought to the edge of destruction by a force it had never anticipated. Humanity, once seen as a fractured and primitive species, had transformed into the catalyst for a revolution that would reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. With the Empire's defenses crumbling under the pressure of humanity's relentless advance, the final line of resistance was broken. The last great stronghold of the Empire, a fortress built from the blood and sweat of its countless conquests, fell to the humans. The Empire's military might, once thought insurmountable, now lay in ruins, and its leaders, desperate and broken, had no choice but to flee into the farthest, most remote corners of the galaxy. Their empire, once a vast and unified empire stretching across light years, now splintered. Without central command, the once mighty organization collapsed into chaos. Its once loyal generals scattered, each seeking refuge wherever they could find it, and the once proud banner of the empire was torn apart, its symbol of oppression now meaningless in the face of the humans' victorious charge. But the collapse of the empire wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more powerful. As the empire fractured, the oppressed species that had long been subjugated under its cruel rule saw their chance for freedom. They saw in humanity's rise a chance to break their chains, to forge a new destiny. The spark of rebellion ignited across the galaxy, and a wave of support for the human-led resistance flooded in from every corner. Species who had once been forced to bow before the empire now stood tall, rallying behind humanity's banner. No longer would they be pawns in the empire's game. They would fight for their own future. This massive outpouring of support led to the formation of something unprecedented, an intergalactic war council, where all species, once enemies and rivals, now united under a common cause. It was a gathering of the oppressed, of the once-forgotten worlds who had seen their chance and taken it. Together, they forged new alliances, sharing knowledge, resources, and strategies in their effort to reshape the galaxy into something better, something free. With the War Council now at the helm, the final bastions of the Empire began to fall, one by one. Each victory brought humanity and its new allies closer to their ultimate goal, the dismantling of the Empire's tyranny once and for all. The galaxy, once ruled by fear and oppression, was now a battleground for a new future, one where the people could govern themselves and stand united against any force that sought to oppress them. Humanity, no longer a mere participant in the struggle, had become the dominant force in the galaxy. Their leadership and bravery had not only toppled the Empire, but had inspired a galaxy-wide awakening. As the final remnants of the Empire crumbled, humanity began to lay the foundations for a new order. They didn't seek power for themselves. They sought to create a collective of free peoples, united by their shared history, struggle, and determination. The galaxy that had once been under the thumb of the Empire's cruelty was now a place where every species, every civilization, could rise, grow, and flourish. As the human-led resistance now stood at the helm of this new era, it became clear. Humanity had not only survived the Empire's wrath, they had become the architects of a new future. The war was over, but the journey was just beginning. The galaxy, once shattered by tyranny, was now on the path to healing and unity, and it was humanity that would guide them forward, not as conquerors, but as champions of freedom. The Empire was gone, and in its place, a new hope had emerged, one that would burn brighter than any empire ever had. The galaxy was reborn, and it would never be the same again. With the fall of the Galactic Empire, the galaxy was forever changed. The tyrannical force that had ruled for millennia had crumbled into dust, leaving behind a void, one that would soon be filled by something unexpected: humanity. Once seen as a primitive species on the fringes of the universe, Earth's people had risen from the ashes of war to become the central power in the galaxy. In the aftermath of the Empire's collapse, humanity stood as a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, and an undeniable testament to the strength of the human spirit. The Earth government, which had once struggled to maintain control over its own planet, now found itself at the heart of galactic politics. Their diplomats, once dismissed as novices, were now sought after by all corners of the galaxy. Leaders from once oppressed worlds looked to humanity for guidance and support, recognizing that it was humanity's unique willpower, ingenuity, and unity that had brought about the fall of the Empire. The transition from war to peace was not easy, but it was necessary. Earth's leaders, supported by the Intergalactic War Council, set about the task of reforming the galaxy, establishing new laws and alliances that would ensure that such an empire would never rise again. Where once there had been division, now there was cooperation. The species that had once been crushed under the heel of the Empire now sat at the table as equals. From the furthest reaches of the galaxy, representatives came to Earth, bringing their cultures, their histories, and their hopes for a better future. Together, they worked to create a new order, one built on the principles of freedom, unity, and respect for all sentient life. Humanity's leadership was crucial in this process, but it was not driven by a desire for power. Instead, it was driven by the understanding that the galaxy could only thrive if all its inhabitants worked together. The scars of the Empire's reign still lingered in some corners of the galaxy, but the message was loud and clear. Underestimate humanity at your peril. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a species that could endure the greatest hardships, adapt to the most difficult circumstances, and unite in the face of overwhelming odds. Humanity's victory had proven that no matter how powerful an empire may seem, it could be brought to its knees by the unyielding force of a united people. As the dust of the war settled, the lessons learned from the conflict remained at the forefront of everyone's mind. The Empire's arrogance had been its downfall, but humanity's rise had been its triumph. The galaxy would never forget the cost of the war, nor the sacrifice that had been made. But it would also never forget the courage, the ingenuity, and the relentless spirit of the humans who had fought and won. With the fall of the Empire came the dawn of a new age, one in which humanity was no longer just a survivor, but a leader, guiding the galaxy toward a future built on cooperation and peace. And though the scars of war would never fully heal, they would serve as a reminder to the galaxy that humanity's place in the stars had been solidified. The rise of the Empire had been met with fear, but the rise of humanity was met with respect. The galaxy, once divided, now stood united under the banner of freedom, with humanity at its helm. This was not the end of the story, it was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, but humanity had already proven that it could overcome anything. What came next would be shaped by their hands. The stars were no longer the domain of empires and tyrants. They belonged to the free, and humanity, standing tall at the forefront, would lead them into a new era.